Hello everyone and welcome to another anime discussion. I'm your host Merlin, and today we'll be discussing the Homunculi from Fullmetal Alchemist, the original anime. Now a little while ago I did a little villains video discussing Father and the Homunculi from the Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood series. People seem to enjoy that video, and interestingly I have had several requests to discuss the villains from the original FMA series. This surprised me, not because I disliked the original interpretations of these characters in anime form, but because I feel that the newer series has overshadowed the original in recent years. So it is sort of refreshing that these villains helped to make an impact. In this video, I will briefly describe the character and delve into their purpose for the series and the impact they have had on the characters or thematic perspective. Then I'll go over some contrast between the two series and then my own personal spin. Be warned, there may be some spoilers ahead. Alright, without further ado, let's dive into it. Lust. Let's begin with the first homunculus we met and arguably the most popular among fans. And no, not for the reason you're thinking. In the original story, each homunculus was actually an extension of Father. A homunculus used Hohenheim's body to create one for himself, creating each of these children, so to speak, as some element of his personality. He did this to expel weakness, therefore each homunculus would represent some negative aspect of humanity, also furthering his point as why he saw humans as barbaric lesser beings. But sometimes the motif doesn't make too much sense. Lust is actually one of the examples of a concept being represented about the same. Her design remains the same, as she represents sexual desires and uses her good looks to ensnare men into traps. Her main ability is to extend her fingers into claws, which can be used as slashing or piercing weapons. In the series, she serves as the field leader of sorts of Dante, her master and the series' main antagonist. She regulates the actions of envy and gluttony as they manipulate alchemists into attempting to create philosopher's stones and cause havoc, which leads to the deaths of thousands in order to further her master's plans. Lust was created from the remains of the lover of Scar's brother. This plot point is actually a major aspect of the character and a major change from Brotherhood, as it leads to some of the best developments for her character here. This is one area where the original anime outshines Brotherhood. Lust is still cool in the manga, but she is reduced to being completely evil and, even worse, basically just a henchman who is the first to be dispatched. In FMA, Lust is shown working for Dante in order to achieve humanity. This is due to her half-memories of her human life. She feels hollow, for homunculus are but shadows of human beings, lacking a soul. This is one of the key themes of the FMA franchise as a whole. Lust is conflicted. She still does horrible things to people, but by the end of the series, she actually does achieve some closure. Lust is one of the most interesting villains in the original series, one of the most complex, and well developed as well. Her story is tragic, but it's that element which makes her story perhaps the most endearing. Envy. The next homunculus we discuss is Envy, this androgynous shapeshifter who can take on the form of virtually anyone he or she sees. Of all the villains in the original FMA series, Envy is perhaps one of the most evil and, in turn, one of the most complex. Much like Lust, in Brotherhood, Envy was an interesting character who does impact the lives of most of the protagonists, primarily through the murder of Maze Hughes upon his investigation into Dante's tampering with the government and starting of various conflicts. In Brotherhood, this is Father's doing. However, this has a much more dramatic impact in the first series for several reasons. For one, Envy seems to take much more enjoyment in causing this painful act. Inflicting this painful act, as well as being the one responsible for so many deaths and causing so much pain to the Elrics and others in the pursuit for the Philosopher's Stone. If it were for this alone, Envy would already be well on his or her way to being considered the Edward's arch-enemy. What solidifies this is another change from the manga. Envy was made from the remains of Hohenheim's first child, who died in infancy. This fact is what separates Envy from Lust. While Lust works for Dante in order to gain humanity again, Envy is simply in it to cause death and pain to humanity as a whole, and to the Elric family specifically, and even more specifically, Edward Elric. This is partially due to the sense of jealousy for the love of Hohenheim showed to his other sons, and a sense of abandonment and anger over a life he believes he should have had, as well as a very likely warped mind due to the transmutation. Envy is essentially the Elric's evil brother, and is the true archenemy of Edward. Envy is a frightening creature and one of the series' most threatening foes, and though he has done well in Brotherhood, it is really better utilized here as he is the main foe for the main characters rather than a supporting character like Mustang. Gluttony. This homunculus is one of the few who actually remains basically the same in both versions, with a few noticeable differences. We never learn Gluttony's origin in this series. In Brotherhood, he's an extension of Father and to some extent a warped relative of the Elrics, and to some extent, like the others, is a warped relative of the Elric brothers. But in the first FMA, homunculus are half-successful recreations of people through human transmutation. They are created by using a piece of a deceased person's body. They don't possess a true soul, but some superpower to replace it. This aspect of a homunculized creation is true to the core of the series' main themes and the journey of the main characters, as the homunculi are a reflection of their own failure to bring their mother back to life and potential evil that alchemy could be used for. Unlike most of his cohorts, Gluttony doesn't have a backstory like the others, but he is essentially Lust's partner and has an insatiable hunger that can't be quenched. This makes him a mindless monster at some points. He has near immortality like the others, but also possesses super strength and acid, which allows him to consume virtually anything. Most disturbingly, Gluttony has a desire for human flesh. When docile, though, Gluttony has a mentality of a small child, and most interestingly shows the most redeemable qualities, unlike most of the others. While his comrades are all there with full knowledge of their own desires and the acts they commit, Gluttony seems to have no real hatred for humanity, he simply just does what he's told. When, spoilers, Lust is killed, Gluttony is so overcome with grief, he refuses to attack the Elrics on Dante's orders. Dante then uses her alchemy to take what little sense of morality he has. This turns him into a mindless monster completely. Edward exclaims that Dante doesn't understand that there is potential for humanity in these beings, and that they can possess good qualities. As you'd expect, Dante just scoffs at this. Ironically, it's Dante's own lack of humanity and understanding which leads to her demise at her own creation's hands, the Gluttony with no humanity left at all. It is a shame that we never learn of the individual Gluttony was based on, as it might have added more dynamic to his character. Still, despite this, Gluttony is a pivotal part of one of the thematic points of FMA. Though admittedly, his character and the explanation for his hunger and true purpose are perhaps better developed in Brotherhood, though with less dramatic flair. Pride. King Bradley is perhaps the most interesting quandary to discuss because he is probably one of the characters who is basically the same in both series in terms of purpose and basic character, but the direction they take with him differs significantly in both. In FMA and Brotherhood, Bradley was a soldier inducted into a special program in the government to develop the perfect military leader. Bradley worked his way up to become the Führer of the nation. However, his origins are a bit altered. In Brotherhood, with Father's secret influence, the government used the Philosopher's Stones comprised of human souls and melded them with physically superior men. The dominant soul would battle it out and take control. In the case of the Homunculus, these were segments of Father, the darkest and most powerful soul. The one man to survive this process was the Wrath we know from Brotherhood. Here this being is known as Pride, though he is described as being the perfect replicant of a human from Dante's experiments, and being one of the younger homunculus. In Brotherhood, we see his darker side and his true hatred for humanity, and rather interesting relation with the Elrics. In the first series, he doesn't seem to hate humanity as much, and just seems to be completely loyal to Dante, more because he enjoys his status and power, and strangely enough, his human family. This makes him a character that's a bit more layered than one would expect, as he's conflicted over his part in the overall plan. Ultimately, his fall is from pride due to his resistance to give up what he has gained. It's not only this, but ironically his love for his son which causes his death at the hands of Mustang, one of the best fights in the original anime. In both series he possesses the ultimate eye, which allows him to predict his opponent's movements with near-perfect accuracy. He also is an excellent sword fighter. Though I like Bradley here, he is probably one of the best homunculi, and I would say he's done better in Brotherhood. As Wrath, he is far more threatening of a character and is expanded on more. It is still hinted that he may have cared for his wife in Brotherhood, though it is only implied and left to the reader's interpretation. Overall, Pride is a less evil version of his manga counterpart, but sadly a little underdeveloped. The character of Pride is completely different in Brotherhood, and is utilized better in terms of the nature of the sin he's named after. Wrath. Ah yes. Here we come to probably one of the least discussed characters from the first series. I'm not saying I've never met anyone that liked him or even disliked him, but in all FMA, he is the one homunculi in both series actually that nobody discusses. Wrath in FMA is actually created from the fetus of the unborn child of the Elric's teacher Izumi. This gives him a very childlike appearance and demeanor, but his hateful side for the Elrics is emphasized in different ways. When the Elrics first attempted human transmutation to bring their mother back to life, they opened a portal to the Gate, or the Truth in Brotherhood, which is a mystical doorway which taps into the very life force of the universe, or something. The Gate is not exactly evil, but it's sometimes very cold in its logic, and seems to be a place where human souls, or their reflections at least, reside. One of the creatures, possibly the remnants of Izumi's child, met Edward there, and was the one responsible for taking his arm and leg during the debacle. This gives Wrath the power of alchemy without the use of transmutation circles, like Edward, which caused Edward to hate this creature even more. Even though Wrath is truly just kind of a lost innocent, with really no idea what's going on. He listens to his mother figures, primarily Sloth. Much like Gluttony, he isn't really in total control of his actions, though unlike Gluttony, he does feel hatred and jealousy for the Elrics. Though I think this character is important in enforcing the theme of accepting death as a part of life, one of the main lessons that the brothers learn early, as well as forgiveness, I do have a problem with this character though. He is basically just a less threatening version of Envy. His basic motivations are the same, just more focused on Edward, and ultimately less evil. Wrath isn't really bad, just tortured. Sadly, he isn't really that well developed either. Just another little plot twist to make Edward hate the homunculi more. Though it does help Edward learn the power to forgive them and see their possible humanity. Sloth. The character that differs the greatest between the two series is Sloth, both in terms of design, abilities, and, well, character. This is one area where I think no one can deny that this version is superior to Brotherhood's. Don't get me wrong, the powers in Brotherhood make more sense, but he's just a lumbering brute. He's like Gluttony, but with less character. Think about that for a second. Sloth is one of the most disturbing and depressing of the characters. Being water-based, she is Dante's right-hand man and works to oversee that the plans of the others are running smoothly. She is the recreation of the Elric's mother. You know that person that they tried to save, setting the whole series in motion? There is no homunculus who is more difficult for the Elrics to face. Not only is she powerful, she is also very cold. She uses the memories of her former self to manipulate Alphonse and try to kill the brothers, two people who were essentially her sons at one point. There is an interesting philosophical question posed about what makes a human, and if these beings are the people that they were based on or only copies. Does this make them new people, or something less than human, or perhaps even more? This theme is one of the central driving forces of both series, but I'll expand on this in a future video. Sloth here seems to suggest how warped Dante's creations truly are, for despite the memories of this mother who was such a wonderful person, Sloth is really just an inhuman monster. Killing her is probably one of the hardest things the brothers had to do, and was a huge step for Edward's character, as he sees the true goal of stopping Dante and her creations is more important than getting their bodies back. This leads to another issue, actually a negative involving the resolution of the series, but I'll get to that in another video as well. In any case, Sloth is a great villain in the series, and a good plot twist, though perhaps a bit underdeveloped. Greed. The last homunculus to discuss here is Greed, probably the most popular villain in both series. Ironically, he's actually the one that is the least different. Really, Greed is basically the same in terms of power, being able to create his ultimate shield, increasing the density of his skin, making it nearly unbreakable. In terms of personality, he's also the same, here being created from a former lover of Dante's. He's seen as, big surprise, greedy and selfish, caring only about attaining power and wealth. This makes him something of a loose cannon, going against his masters in both series. He also does seem to ironically have some human compassion, oddly enough. He sympathizes with the Chimera soldiers in Lab 5, and sets them free as long as they follow him, demonstrating his ability to influence others. He even shows remorse when they sacrifice themselves for him. Also in both series, he sacrifices himself as well in order to help the Elrics, seeing the main antagonists for the threat they truly are. In FMA, his role is perhaps even more important, with his second fight with Edward not only being an excellent one, but carrying much more dramatic weight, as he wanted to help Edward find the weaknesses for the homunculi. He does this out of a sense of guilt, as he sees them as monstrous creations. He also leads Edward to Dante, which leads to the series' ultimate conclusion, with Edward hunting down the other homunculi and their master. Edward also learns the difficulty of actually killing another person, seeing some of Greed's subdued humanity. Though Greed is done excellently in Brotherhood as well, I do feel that he is a bit overshadowed by Ling, and his development being less radical is similarly effective there. All of these beings work for Dante, the series' main antagonist. However, I feel that this video has gone on long enough, and Dante is big enough of a villain to warrant her own video, which I'll follow up with this one. Well, those were my thoughts on the homunculi from the original anime. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below, and as always, requests are always welcome. Merlin out. Peace.